Young man stands over the skeleton with his sword still in hand, while the other knight lies motionless in the dust. Butler reminds Rina that lord, and Rina responds, "Why? Yes, master." As soon as Rina answers, man keeps her pinned under an armored boot while a voice snaps. "You wasted my time to capture a weakling like her?" At the same time, skull-faced figure leans in and cuts off with, "Teach." That's... Butler quickly backtracks, saying he was sure Rina was a strong necromancer, and then he cuts himself off with a sudden, "Ah." And instead of finishing his excuse, a voice breaks into a desperate confession, saying that for this sin, they will pay with their life. Butler cuts the confession off with a strange shout, yelling, "Enough." He shuts that down immediately and demands, "Did I ever tell you to die by your own hands?" Butler drives the point deeper and asks whether any noble would care if an informant got killed for a false report, with a sword lying on the ground beside him. He gets his answer by turning away, saying he has somewhere else to be and is leaving now. Butler is left on the ground, panting beside the dropped sword. As he walks off, the bald-haired armored figure hands the next step over to Skeleton and says the woman can be punished at Skeleton's discretion after a trial. Moments later, Skeleton closes in with a sword drawn and stands over Skeleton, who can only brace on the ground beneath the pressure. Now Skeleton realizes the attack came from someone he never even saw clearly, and the strike was so fast he missed both the approach and the swing. He immediately reassesses his opponent and admits this one is different, on an entirely different level from everyone he has faced so far. Now Skeleton faces the bald-haired armored figure and asks the only thing that matters. Can he win? He gets that answer fast as Rina buckles in front of Skeleton, shaking out a pained groan while Skeleton stays fixed on Rina. He goes quiet for a beat, grips his sword, and cuts the thought off himself. No, that does not matter. He answers that hesitation by charging straight in as Skeleton lunges at Rina through the clash. At the same time, Rina moves, and a voice drives the moment forward with a blunt vow. No matter who stands in the way, the fight is on. Butler breaks first, shouting in outrage over what he calls Skeleton's insolence as Skeleton and the bald-haired armored humanoid stay locked across the weapon between them. He does not get an answer, because Butler suddenly cries out and turns as 4 armored figures appear inside the purple haze behind him. At least some of them are already staggering and groaning, and Butler is there among the group with a sword in hand. He immediately starts barking at the others, demanding to know what they are doing and ordering them to hurry up and help. A shot cuts through the chaos as an advanced skill triggers. The target is too low level to resist it, and the system locks their movement in place while someone blurts out, What's this?" Butler realizes what hit him and blurts out that it is a skill. The bald-haired armored figure stands over him and answers with a single, measured reaction. Interesting. Now Butler collapses to the ground, shaking out broken breaths, and a voice remarks in surprise that even with the caster unconscious, her summon is still moving. The bald-haired butler turns at that, while another butler peeks out from behind in visible surprise. Instead, Rina lets out a groan from the ground with arrows still in her back, and Butler looks down at her and doubts the whole assumption, remarking that she does not look like any high-ranking necromancer at all. He raises his weapon and says that if their guess is right, killing her now would be beneficial. He gets cut off by a shout to move, while Butler drags himself forward on all fours and the masked figure fills the next instant. A voice keeps shouting, "Move," as a dark-sleeved hand swings a gray handle in and smashes bone-like shapes out of the way. He only says, "Then," and raises his sword as Skeleton drops in from above with a blade of its own. The silver-haired armored figure meets the strike head-on. He drives the clash through, and Skeleton drops into a one-knee crouch with its sword pulled back, already set to spring again. He curses under his breath and admits the reports were not completely wrong after all. A blade suddenly buries itself in the ground right in front of Skeleton, cutting off the exchange. He jerks and looks up with a startled gasp. He raises his sword and declares that it's over, but a small bone-like piece strikes against the blade and stops that claim cold. Instead, Skeleton lunges in, only to take a hard hit straight through the torso that blasts fragments outward and stops the charge. Skeleton jolts, looks around, and blurts out, "Huh? This is..." Now the voice wanders through a cave, unable to place where it is, and immediately asks what happened to Rubia and the cemetery. He cuts himself off when he spots Rina lying there asleep, the snoring making it plain enough, and Skeleton blurts out, "Is this perhaps?" A blue status screen confirms the inheritance is complete and identifies Skeleton as a level 1 skeleton. Looking it over, Skeleton asks one thing: where is it headed? Elsewhere, a purple light fills the cavern while Rina lies with her eyes closed beneath it. A ladder runs up the cave wall beside her. Now Skeleton realizes it really is alive again, but instead of pouring rain and thunder, all it gets is the sound of water dripping through the cave. Instead, a hooded figure grabs Skeleton by the skull and identifies it as the scatterbrained necromancer. A hooded humanoid wonders if seeing Rubia again is already impossible, and a blue notification cuts in with a sharp bing. The message gets worse. A memorial window states that after dying 5 times, the speaker maxed out likability with the necromancer in a previous life, and the bonus title upgrades to Necromancer's Lover. The only answer it gets is a stunned repeat of that new title. And the screen spells out what that title actually does. It boosts starting likability with necromancers tied to the speaker, with an extra bonus for one they have a working relationship with. After reading that, the only verdict is that it does not look useful in combat. As Skeleton looks over at Rina under the blanket, it starts questioning the title itself and wonders whether maxing that likability means the system recognized Rina as a necromancer. And that makes the Skeleton remember one more thing. A girl once said she would protect it as Rina moves off to the right. So Skeleton decides it has to repay her, but getting out comes first. Before anything else follows, a voice cuts in with a sharp call. Skeleton cuts in and orders the move immediately, telling Rina to leave behind anything that will slow them down and pack only what they need. Rina, still on the ground, questions it because it is still dark out. She gets her answer right away as Skeleton snaps, now, hauls Rina up, and runs with her through the rocky path. She immediately tries to push the pace even harder, fixating on one thing: that affinity effect is still rising, and she has to get out before it climbs any further. She pushes the urgency further, warning that if they do not move now, subjugation forces will arrive by morning, and Rina will be put in danger again. Rina stays right behind Skeleton as that decision hardens. As they keep moving, someone checks their destination and gets the answer. The next dungeon is the arid underground cemetery. Rina immediately cuts in and tells them to head for the ruins of Spider's Vault instead. A report stops Skeleton cold. From what they recently heard, the arid underground cemetery is completely barren. She immediately echoes the key point back in surprise. Instead, the cemetery turns out to be completely empty. A voice says the monsters are gone so thoroughly it is as if they were vaporized, and with nothing left there, they conclude there is probably nothing to gain by going in and suspect subjugation forces were there recently. Then Skeleton suddenly looks off-panel and blurts out, "Them." He turns at once, and as the exchange picks up, Rina starts with a cautious question while Skeleton answers with a simple yes. He keeps the exchange going by asking if anyone knows the Blue Knights whose armor bears a lion crest. Rina thinks it over, recognizes the crest, and asks if they mean the Blue Lion Templars. After a beat, she identifies them as one of the knightage that serve under the Empire. Skeleton immediately presses the point and asks how strong a knightage like that is. Rina admits she has never seen the Blue Lion Templars herself, but she starts answering anyway. She goes on to explain that the Blue Lion Templars are said to rank first or second among all knighthages, and their leader is counted among the Empire's top 4 swordsmen. And Skeleton immediately locks onto one more detail. The man they're talking about is said to carry a white blade called Seraphim. And now the name drops at last. The silhouette behind Skeleton is Marquis Vatian Ponriandro. Someone recognizes him on the spot and blurts out, "It's him." Rina can barely process it. The man they just identified is one of the Empire's top 4 swordsmen, and she questions why someone like Marquis Vachampon Riandro is this far south as Skeleton keeps moving forward. As they keep moving, Rina points out that if Skeleton wants to head to the ruins of Spider's Vault, they will have to stop by the nearby town first. Skeleton turns back with a simple question. What for? Rina answers right away. They need to make preparations before going into a spider cavern, starting with antidotes for the venom and firebombs in case webs block the way. The hooded figure just faces her in silence. After a brief cough, Rina adds one more thing. She wants to bathe. The hooded figure gives her nothing back but silence. A moment later, someone admits they have only been thinking of herself, and Skeleton answers with a simple acknowledgement. She understands. Now Skeleton finally brings it back to the point and starts on the town Rina wanted to stop by. And when they reach the town, Rina lights up at once and blurts out that this is probably the biggest town in the whole region, which means the general store should be huge too. And now the place finally gets a name as a voice announces, this is Syablum, with a castle waiting at the end of the forest path. Then Skeleton looks ahead and says, Rubia, while Rina lifts an arm toward the sky. Skeleton moves on with Skeleton following behind, and Skeleton asks Rina if Skeleton should go alone if Rina is uncomfortable around humans. Rina only leans forward and clutches her strap. She answers right away, no. When Rina blurts out in surprise, Skeleton shuts it down completely and says she will not let Rina go in alone. Rina immediately changes that answer and says she is going with Skeleton after all. As Skeleton stops, Rina calls out for Skeleton to wait a second. A moment later, Skeleton stops and turns. Instead, Skeleton questions the cape, and Rina tells Skeleton she did not give it out of need at all. She just wanted something nice to look at. That is when Gatekeeper cuts in and stops them at the entrance, demanding a toll before they can pass. Now a hooded figure eyes the coins in his hand and sizes them up as a pair, calling them tourists while Gatekeeper reaches in to take the toll. He barely gets that question out before Rina wraps herself around Skeleton's arm and answers that she came with her husband, adding that Skeleton is an oathless knight. Gatekeeper gives in with a click of his tongue and has the gate opened, letting them through. Rina keeps the joke going when someone questions the husband line, brushing it off and saying there is nothing to be embarrassed about. That is when both of them catch something off to the side. Rina turns at once, and Skeleton stops short with a startled reaction. Rina is the first to ask what is wrong, and the answer comes right away. There's opium in the streets, and the smell is strong. And that makes the next detail worse. Even this deep in town, with no opium den anywhere in sight, the smell is still overpowering. One of them immediately agrees. And the reason becomes obvious fast. Whoever is speaking notes that this place clearly does not welcome strangers. Now, even Metalsmith says it outright. The mood in town feels strange. So Rina lowers her voice and makes the call to stop searching and get lodging first, steering Skeleton toward the inn, and Skeleton agrees at once. So Rina immediately turns the cover story into action, clinging to the other figure's arm and insisting they act like a married couple. When the other one tells her to let go and stop fooling around, she doubles down and even tells them to call her honey, while a silhouetted person waits behind a wall nearby. A woman greets the newcomer and asks the only thing that matters right away. Do they need lodging or a meal? They answer at once. Both, and they want the meals sent to their room. At the same time, someone questions whether the woman behind the counter is the new owner, points out that she does not have a snake marking on her neck, and she turns with a brief, "Oh?" She leans on the counter and teases that Skeleton seems to want more than just food and a room. Rina answers with an angry growl, while Skeleton can only stare back in confusion. By morning, a voice cheerfully says it got a good night's sleep as birds chirp outside. Now Rina heads out saying a bath and a real bed washed all her fatigue away, and Skeleton follows with a simple reply that he is glad to hear it. Rina throws up a hand and calls the next move, the general store. Skeleton follows right behind, turning his head as they head out together. As they move, Rina glances back when Smith suddenly stops and looks off to the side. Rina asks what is wrong, but after a brief pause, Smith only says it is nothing and tells her to keep going. A voice suddenly cuts in and demands, "Excuse me? What do you mean?" Shopkeeper repeats that he already said it clearly. Fire bombs and antidotes are sold out. Rina can only blurt out that there is no way. So Rina immediately switches to a new order, asking for 10 medium-sized bottles and a cask of tar, and Shopkeeper shuts that down too. Those are sold out as well. Smith steps in with his own complaint, demanding to know what the shop does have, and asking if they're treating them differently for not being locals. The answer is just as blunt. They happen to ask for the exact items that are already gone, and that cannot be changed. Smith gets nothing softer in return. The shopkeeper snaps at him to get out, says they are not welcome here, and flatly refuses to sell them anything at all. Rina snaps back in disbelief, but Smith cuts it off and tells Rina to forget it and leave. She does not let it go, and Rina presses Skeleton to act, demanding to know if a knight is really going to let bastards like him walk away. Now Rina keeps protesting as she helps Rina down the street, insisting the shopkeeper never meant to sell to them and only lied that the items were gone. At the same time, a hooded figure peeks out from cover while another observer stands nearby, watching them leave. Now, someone stops at the sight of Smith and starts to recognize him, trailing off with, "You're," while Rina stays beside him with her arms crossed. Skeleton cuts in and pins it down. This man was near the town entrance by the blacksmith, and now he wants to know why Smith was tailing them. A hooded figure cuts in with a simple order to follow, and when Skeleton turns toward them, someone answers with a startled, "What?" Skeleton questions that warning and asks if Smith means the alleyway, but Smith corrects Skeleton at once. The danger is the town itself. So Smith presses for answers, demanding to know why they were followed and why they were brought here, while Rina watches and another Smith quietly pours purple liquid into a bucket. Rina jerks at the question when an unseen voice asks if they're heading to the ruins of Spider's vault, and all she can get out is a shocked, "How did you?" Smith takes another pull from his mug. He points out the obvious problem. If they're really going into a spider cavern, they'll need fire bombs and antidotes. Instead, a voice shuts that down at once. They will not get those items here, and even if the shop had them, nobody would sell to them. Skeleton pushes back with one question. "Why not?" A voice answers bluntly. "The Lord of Yublum and the guards are raising spiders." At that, the cup jolts hard enough for the liquid to splash. Smith blurts out that the guards are raising spiders too, then admits he has no idea why they'd be doing it, while Rina stays fixed on him and listens. Smith answers that the town is dying, and when someone questions that, he explains why. After the previous lord died in a suspicious accident, the new lord replaced the guards with men he calls no better than animals. From there, opium spread through the town until the people were hooked, and to keep buying more, they sold off their land and houses for almost nothing. The Lord took those properties gladly, and Smith adds that anyone who disobeyed the Lord, or even questioned him, was dragged off to the spider cavern. Pressed on why he is saying this, Smith makes it personal. His wife was taken too, and now he asks Smith to get revenge in his place. Smith pushes back at once, asking why he should take that revenge at all. Skeleton fires back that Smith came here for exactly that, and when Smith falters, Skeleton points straight at that armor. He answers for himself this time. Smith steps in and declares, "I made it," and the pink-haired armored figure points to the armor and explains that a young woman bought it for someone dear to her. And that is when Skeleton suddenly calls out, "Rubia!" The blonde-haired brown dress or tunic over white blouse with lace-up collar and gold square accents figure turns toward the voice but says nothing, while a hand nearby clenches into a fist. Skeleton closes the distance on Smith and grabs, or slams him in the chest, forcing him back. He accuses Smith of knowing that tourists who came to this town alone were being targeted, and demands to know why he did nothing. But the next words cut through the argument. One of them admits he is a coward and says he has lived that way his entire life. Smith stays leaned in toward the pink-haired figure as the confession lands. He finally breaks and throws out a different question, asking, "How old do I look to you?" Instead, the answer turns into a confession. An old man says he could never have saved her and calls that cowardice pitiful. As that lands, Skeleton and a blonde-haired armored figure close in on the pink-haired armored figure, while Smith sits with his face buried in his hands. He finally gives them something useful. Smith says the captain of the guards and his men should already be taking the criminals to the spider cavern, catching himself after calling them fodder, while Rena watches from nearby. Rena stays silent as the dark-haired man digs through the shelves and offers her something to burn both the spiders and the people he just sent to the cavern. Rena jolts at the sight of it, and Smith immediately explains that the flame came from the sea and never goes out. The voice then gives the object a name, Grasmere's flame. A guard shouts an order, "Walk in a straight line," as shackled prisoners march forward, their heavy chains clanking with each step. Another guard screams at them to move faster, threatening them with their leader's arrival. Overlooking the path, Rena watches alongside a blonde-haired companion. While Skeleton watches silently, Rena leans forward from her perch in the trees and shouts, "Hey you better pick up the pace." Climbing the stone steps toward a massive cave entrance, Rena and Smith arrive at the ruins of Spider's Vault. One of them remarks that it's on a much larger scale than the last dungeon they challenged. Rena turns to Skeleton, asking whether she should carry a piece of their gear or if he plans to use it immediately. Skeleton offers no reply, standing perfectly still in his armor. Rena, she notes that even in Grasmere, the town of blacksmiths, the flames are an incredibly rare find. The man confirms her observation, admitting that in his entire life, he's only succeeded in making one. He then offers to show them how to use it. Skeleton picks up the device himself, wondering aloud what it is. The man immediately panics, yelling for him to be careful. He explains that once the fire is lit, it will never go out. Skeleton immediately asks for confirmation it can never be extinguished. The man explains that if the bottle weren't enchanted with cold magic, the flame inside would burn for decades. He adds that it can be used in place of a blast furnace for refining iron, and that's not all. Holding out a pouch, Smith explains that if they spray its contents on themselves, they won't feel the heat from the flames. The man then reveals he was saving that flame to create his masterpiece. He's willing to give it up, but only if they use it to get rid of those evil bastards. Skeleton then hands over a sword, telling them to hold on to it for now. He warns that the weapon is dangerous and should only be used in a true emergency. With the sword now in hand, a command is given to head inside. Rena and Skeleton immediately start down the rocky steps. The steps lead them into a massive, dark cavern, its entrance and walls choked with thick, ancient spiderwebs. Inside, Spider Monster remarks that while it's her first time seeing the ruins of Spider's Vault, it feels less like ruins and more like a loft. But an unsettling silence greets them. A voice cuts through the stillness, asking why it's so quiet when a lot of people entered right before them. The blonde-haired Skeleton realizes they've lost the trail. The path splits into too many directions, and the uneven floor has hidden any tracks. As they begin to ask where to go, they stop short, instead turning to Skeleton directly for an answer. Rena turns to her companion, saying she has something to ask. She wants to know about a girl named Rubia. Skeleton claims Rubia meant little to them, but their companion explains that Rubia was buying that very suit of armor for someone she held dear. At this, Skeleton turns sharply toward her. They try to justify it, claiming the armor was needed only for their mutual benefit. Rena seems to accept this at first, but she cuts the explanation short with a single word. However, the voice from the helmet finally admits the truth, speaking with heavy regret. I couldn't keep my promise to protect her. The moment passes as the blonde-haired Skeleton points out their path has come to a dead end. Addressed as Skeleton, Skeleton turns around and curtly asks what the matter is now. Without a word, Rena holds out a golden pendant. Skeleton looks down at the offering, asking what it is. Rena demands to know why she's giving the pendant to them, but Rena simply replies that she isn't. Instead, Rena clarifies that she only means to lend the pendant, explaining that the item is very precious to her. The person with her starts to argue that Rena should keep such a precious item, but stops mid-sentence. Something drips down onto Rena's helmet. A moment later, A hand comes into view, coated in a sticky substance, as a voice asks what it is. Skeleton looks up, and a deep growl rumbles from the darkness. A monstrous spider looms directly above, its many red eyes fixed on them. That's when a heavy foot slams onto the ground nearby. Rina's face pales in terror as she cries out, "They're here!" Suddenly, Rina plummets through the air, screaming, as Skeleton shouts her name helplessly from the ground. Just then, a black, spiky projectile streaks through the air. Skeleton raises an arm, roaring in fury. "Why you?" But Rina is already moving, slamming her shadowy blade into the ground and shouting, "Get out of my way!" Skeleton doesn't even look at her, his attention fixed solely on the massive spider. He understands now he has to cut that spider thread. With that realization, Skeleton explodes forward, launching himself into a full-speed dash. But he's stopped dead, sent flying backward by a heavy blow that forces him to his knees. The massive spider has him in its grip, crushing his armor with overwhelming force. But as the monster screeches, Skeleton fights back, driving his dagger straight into its face. Just then, Rina plummets from the ledge, crying out, "Sayar Night," as she falls past the insects crawling on the cave walls below. A blade plunges deep in a spider's head, followed by a furious shout, "Damn insect!" But before the spider can even react, 3 bolts of red energy tear through the darkness, flying past Skeleton. Rina hangs upside down, trapped in a massive web by a single thread of silk. All around her, Spider Monster and other giant spiders begin to close in. Rina pants, struggling for every breath as she dangles helplessly from the silk. Sweat pours down her face as the single thought echoes in her mind. This is bad. A sword suddenly ignites with power. Skeleton holds the glowing blade high, ready for the attack. Skeleton is facing a swarm of giant spiders. One is already grievously wounded with green fluid pouring from its back, but the others just screech as they prepare to attack. Skeleton trembles, overwhelmed by their numbers. A single thought cuts through the panic. There are too many of them. But that thought doesn't stop the attack. Skeleton lunges forward, bringing the sword down in a violent clash against the monster's armored leg. The blade tears straight through Spider Queen, bisecting the monster in a spray of green fluid as a cry rings out. "Damn insects!" But before the spray can settle, another spider lunges, unleashing a powerful stream of webs in retaliation. Skeleton brings the sword down in a powerful cleave, a shout declaring, "This is nothing." But the blade is suddenly struck by an unseen force, knocking it clean out of Skeleton's hand. A cry of shock escapes as Skeleton reaches for the tumbling weapon. Before Skeleton can recover the weapon, thick webs erupt and bind them completely. The strands tighten, pulling violently at their limbs as they struggle against the trap. A curse escapes as Skeleton's hand trembles, unable to break the unyielding strands while Spider Monster hisses from above. A powerful, unseen blow suddenly slams into Skeleton's chest, cracking their armor. But even as they are thrown back by the force, a defiant thought rings out. "I can't let it end like this." That defiant thought is cut short as a massive burst of flames suddenly erupts, engulfing the armored creature completely. "Sorry for keeping you waiting," a voice shouts. It's a woman named Rina, aiming a massive glowing cannon, as the person in the purple helmet turns in shock. "Here are the smoked spiders you ordered," Rina yells with a manic grin, unleashing a massive blast from her weapon as a voice immediately shouts her name. The fiery projectile slams into Spider Monster, engulfing it in a massive explosion. A piercing shriek echoes from within the flames as the creature is incinerated by the blast. With the immediate threat handled, Rina turns to ask if Skeleton is all right. Still caught in the creature's webs, Skeleton confesses they barely made it out alive. Rina is just as panicked, her voice trailing off as she explains that hanging upside down made all the blood rush to her head. But before she can reply, a voice screams a warning. "Rina, above you." Another spider monster descends from the darkness, targeting her next. With a furious scream of "Why you dash," Rina immediately fires her cannon, unleashing a massive blast at the creature descending upon her. The fury of her scream is gone, replaced by a wide, manic grin as her weapon clicks. She scans the area, gleefully asking, "Now, what else should I burn next?" Her battle high evaporates as she inspects the weapon, whispering, "This is really something." Skeleton places a hand on her shoulder, and the pieces click into place. This was why they had to bring the flame in a bottle. Their attention snaps to two spider-like monsters scuttling away in the distance. A voice realizes that if the creatures are fleeing in that direction, then that must be the path deeper inside. The purple-haired man declares, "I'll pull it out now," as he forcefully wrenches his sword free. At that same moment, the entire corridor erupts in a torrent of fire, incinerating the pack of spider monsters. A sharp bing rings out through the cavern, confirming the kills. A system window immediately flashes in front of Skeleton, announcing that he's leveled up. He has a sudden realization combat provides a noticeably faster way to gain experience. Rina turns to him, asking for his thoughts on her performance and playfully comparing herself to his wife. Skeleton answers plainly, she was the one who saved him. His armor clanks, breaking the moment. Now then, Skeleton begins, "Shall we get started?" He cuts himself off with a cry of alarm, landing beside Rina to find her unconscious on the ground. He lifts her into his arms. She pants for breath as an urgent voice cries out her name. That urgent voice belongs to a woman named Rina, who points out the festering bite mark on Rina's shoulder. She warns that an antidote is needed immediately, or it will be too late. But any plan to find an antidote is cut short by a furious roar, as a massive armored monster unleashes a piercing scream. Skeleton, Rina, and another armored fighter immediately counter the beast, using their torches to drive the massive spider back. They shout commands, trying to force the creature to stay still as they press the attack. From a higher vantage point, Skeleton yells down at the red-haired man holding a torch, "Hey, you'd better do it properly." But the fight is interrupted by the appearance of Monster Queen, a figure clad in ornate purple and gold armor. A voice immediately asks if she's the Monster Queen, the true boss of the dungeon. Meanwhile, Rina struggles against the poison, thinking her attackers must have an antidote. But her thoughts are cut short as she realizes something is even more important. That realization dawns on another as a voice questions why humans would be raising monsters in the first place. Another soldier simply calls out for their captain. A voice tells Spider Queen not to be disappointed. The speaker, a person with a snake tattoo on their neck, reminds her that she's fed regularly. All she needs to do is behave. He follows the command with a threat, promising to burn her eggs to a crisp.